Hi everybody, Peter Swain here from Hatmankind. I'm here with Sean Callagy for our segment on mindset and mentality. And we're going to take a slight break from the norm here. And we're going to talk about the issue that's very present in our society at the moment and is obviously getting rightfully a lot of attention. And that's obviously the murder of George Floyd. Now, I use the word murder, and I want to be careful with this because I lived in the Middle East for a long time, and I believe that due process and innocent until proven guilty is a very important thing. And whilst I think everybody has reached what is probably absolutely the right conclusion, there is still a process that courts should go through in order to prove that. But with that being said, there can be no doubt, I think, from everybody that both on a systemic basis and an individual basis, that racism is still a factor, a major factor in our society. So before we go into this with Sean, I just want to say on behalf of myself and everybody at Hatmankind, we are appalled by what we have seen, and the response of people and the anger is justifiable, 100% justifiable. And whilst I can only ever see this through the lens of a 40-year-old white man, I see personally, I believe that every human life has immense value, and any taking of that is something that should be evaluated with extreme prejudice to make sure that it isn't a case of prejudice. There are no words that you can put together around this that give it justice. So for anyone that has heard something that I've said incorrectly, or anyone that hears anything Sean and I are about to say and takes offense, please note it was not meant in that way whatsoever. But this is an issue that, even though it's incredibly hard to discuss, is not really an issue that can be left undiscussed. So Sean, with that in mind, I know you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so agreed. It's a little challenging to talk about the subject as a white male, right? Because there is appropriate invalidation of my perspective right off the bat, appropriate invalidation, because I'm white and I'm a male. And the two categories of people that experience the world very differently than I do are women, which I'm not one of, and people of color. Particularly folks that are, I will use the term African-American and or Black interchangeably. You know, for most of the people that I know that would be referred to as either African-American or Black, the people I've spoken to have said they're comfortable using those terms interchangeably. And I don't even know if it's exactly accurate to say African-American if somebody is not from Africa. So, you know, there's interesting complexity even in labeling of things, which I am present to. So just, you know, a couple of minutes that we have here, which could take hours to set language and context. One of the things that came up last night in my life was a chat I had with my mom. And today is the second anniversary of my grandmother's passing. And this is an issue that was not unfamiliar to our world and family from many different directions. And my ex-wife, who I've been divorced twice, my ex-wife was Latina, and her biological children, my stepchildren, are half Black. And so while I definitely cannot speak from a perspective of how it would feel, I can speak from the perspective of what I saw. And what I saw was unquestionable, reflexive racial bias. I will footnote. Studies have shown, at least the studies that I have reviewed through the work of Malcolm Gladwell, that systemic racial bias exists. And that racial bias exists across the board, systemically, against African Americans, Black people. And that's just like what the science shows. And I think, so Peter, I would enter this conversation from the space that I would like to presume I am racist. I would presume you are racist. I would presume that from what the science shows, that unfortunately, sadly, tragically, even from the baby doll experiment that Joseph McClendon chatted with me about, and from the science studies that Malcolm Gladwell cited, that there's much evidence to demonstrate that even Black people are prejudiced against Black people. That somehow conditioned into our nervous system has been that reflexive reaction from the earliest of ages, tragically. I want to bifurcate this conversation into that fact that racism is conditioned in, period, into me, right? Into you, into everybody. And before going further, I want to say, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry that inside of me is that. I'm sorry it's inside of everyone. In the conversation I had with my mom last night, one of her friends had said she was really upset because on a Bible study call, there was a Black woman who was offended that the other people on the phone line that all happened to be Caucasian or white had not apologized for what had occurred. And my mom's friend was angry. She's like, I can't believe this woman's upset and mad that we didn't say we're sorry. And so actually Peter Mona said something perfect. My mom's like, I didn't know what to say. I'm not sure. Like, I'm confused. And Mona said, it doesn't take a lot to say you're sorry. It doesn't take a lot to be sorry. And if a group of people faces systemic conditioned in racism, like, I think we probably should say we're sorry. And if they say, I'm upset you didn't say you're sorry, maybe the answer is, hey, I'm sorry that I was ignorant. I was blind. And yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not saying I'm sorry, and I am sorry. So I would jump in there and then say, there's a secondary component of people that are actively engaged in propagating racial bias through their conversations, through their perspectives. And that, to me, is on a massive scale. There's joking around about different dynamics and stereotypes. Where and how does all this fit together, and where do we go from here? I'm present to. I'm also present to the fact that, I'm very conditioned to, like, what's our outcome? But I'm also conditioned to being heard. And I think at the first stage of what's happening, I am clear that there needs to be, like, listening, acknowledgement, and validation. Like, there needs to be that. And I think when we respond and go, looting doesn't do anything, and what are people doing and destroying? Like, what is going on? This ridiculous behavior. I was just upset before I got on this call with you because people weren't acting common sense, and I was emotionally charged. And I was talking to Mona about it. You may have even overheard some of it. And I'm sorry I was late for you, Peter. And I was just upset. And I just needed to be heard before I can get to the outcome, right? Like that, we're human. So I can't imagine facing dynamics of systemic racism as an African-American, right? Or a Black person in the world to feel, I can't even begin to imagine what watching and hearing of a white police officer kneeling on somebody's neck as they cried out for help, what that would do to me. Like, I get upset when things don't make sense, and I have a challenge with it. That's maybe part of my fundamental drive towards, I'm blinded and what we're doing here with Hack Mankind. I can't even imagine. So I'm sorry. Now, the outcome-driven part of me wants to, like, move into like what can we do to fix it? because it's also, you know, I have great empathy for a store owner that gets their store destroyed, or, you know, people being hurt and things happening. You know, I mean, I don't think that's like a great thing either. Um, but I'm also present to like the Boston Tea Party. I'm present to the fact that we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and decided that was a better outcome to create a disruption to get somewhere than not dropping that bomb. So there's harm, damage that's created collaterally all the time. So I am not assessing that I know like what's right and wrong in this situation. But as I you know, been shared a couple of times, my reality in this is it's like holy cow complicated, and I'll drop into the buckets of systemic racism, ongoing levels of active race, like conditioned in racism inside of people, um, and the other, you know, subset of that is the other dynamics that Malcolm Gladwell speaks of. I am present to the actual active dynamic of at the lowest levels of things, you know, uh, joking about things or laughing about things, which I'm sure I've laughed at things that I, in this moment, would hope are not on video. And, you know, I've never used the N word, you know, but if somebody made a joke, had an accent, I laughed. I laughed at those things when I watched the Medea movie with my stepchildren, right? Is that okay? You know, I don't know. Is it okay if you're black but not if you're white? I don't know. And I think that what I am also present to is how do we figure all of this out and function practically? Because reflecting back to Malcolm Gladwell, at the end of Talking to Strangers, his bottom line take of the book was we're horrific at like assessing who's lying and telling the truth, but we can't function not trusting, and that the cost of trust is some real problems along the way, like Bernie Madoff, like, you know, the scandal at Penn State University with Jerry Sandusky, like the doctor that molested gymnasts and children. So there's like societal functioning dynamics that leave space for crazy problems. And so I am present to like all of those things. So how are you, Peter?
So I have multiple, thank you for that. I have multiple things I want to say that link into things you said. And I didn't want to interrupt you because I think it was important. My business partner for years was a Swiss gentleman. And he used to say consistently, he would say the phrase, "I'm disappointed with this." And after about 3 years, I blew up. I went, "What the fuck do you mean? I've done everything. I've done this, I've done that. I've sweated up 20 hours a day, and you come and tell me you're disappointed?" And he said, "Aren't you disappointed? You did all that effort. You put all that work in. Aren't you disappointed?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." He's like, so what's your problem? If you're disappointed as well, why are you reacting?" And I was like, oh, God. To me, the word disappointed is a word that's reserved for my parents to use. It was the last line of my father's defense. It was, "I couldn't be more disappointed with you." That word cuts through everything else and makes me respond like an 8-year-old again. And I realized in that moment the danger of assuming that the language is being used the same way by two different people. Now, he was fluent in English. He was Swiss, but he was fluent. So he was actually using the English language in a better way than I was in some ways. He was using the word disappointed to mean he was disappointed. Not he was disappointed with me. He was just disappointed. And that would be my advice back to your mother in kind of third-party way of saying, I mean, Sean, if she's your mother, I'm pretty convinced I know her personality at least 5%. I'm sure she's sorry that this is happening. It doesn't mean that you're acknowledging you're a guilty party inside that event occurring. And I think it is an important lesson for people. Yeah, I am absolutely 100% apologetic that we live in this world, and any part I've played in making this world, I give my heartfelt apologies. So that would be my first thing that I would say.
Thank you, sir.
My second thing is Bernie Madoff and everyone else you said. I think this had the reaction it had for two reasons. I'm obviously not excusing in any way, shape, or form the actions of that police officer or the three police officers that were watching as it happened. So, but I want to skate past that for a second, not because it's not important, but because hopefully it just goes without, it doesn't go without saying, and this is where I get myself in trouble, but that's not what I want to talk about. The reaction, I believe, was so abhorrent, so charged, because if I sent a video, Sean, of you kneeling on someone's neck until that person died to the police would be at your house in 5 minutes to arrest you.
Yes.
I'm not a lawyer, but that is enough of a burden of evidence of proof in order to issue an arrest warrant. Not charge, arrest and charge are different things. But there's certainly enough for a policeman to issue the words, "I'm arresting you on the suspicion of." There's no debate. And there's also no debate that there was enough evidence to have an aiding and abetting against the three police officers that were watching. Arrest, not charge. This is two different words. And the fact that that didn't happen / took so long to happen, I think is what leads us all to look back at ourselves, our society, and go, are we still here? Seriously, are we still here? I would like to see, and I don't know how possible this is even is, my end answer right now is I would like to see somebody issue an arrest warrant for aiding and abetting to the people that didn't issue the arrest warrant. And say you're obviously complicit, because it's pretty obvious to about 7 billion people that you should have issued an arrest warrant within about 30 minutes of seeing that. And you didn't. So why didn't you? So I think what I'm trying to say in that is George Floyd, Bernie Madoff, any one of these, let's hope, I'm going to call them outliers, but they're not. These extreme events are in quotes, okay, if the system responds appropriately and goes, wow, this isn't okay. Legally, we have to change the way we do this because we have to protect this so it doesn't happen again. And that's why I think people are so angry. But the second thing I wanted to say, which in some ways is more relevant to Hack Mankind, is I've been saying for years that the push towards the excesses of capitalism and consumerism were incredibly dangerous. Because as soon as I entered the personal development space, I understood how easy it was to program my brain. And marketeers and psychologists are paid billions to program my brain on my behalf, to teach me that drinking Coke is going to make my life better, that I must have the latest iPhone 12. And I actually believe I should have it. I mean, it's going to make absolutely no difference to my world, but I still, standing here, believe that I must have the next iPhone. And then when we got rid of all those messages in COVID, we got rid of 3,500 to 10,000 messages hitting every single person every single day. I think our brains reset. And I think the reason we're so angry about what's happened now is because, to quote you, we've been unblinded. Not by being unblinded, but by all of the extraneous crap in our life being stripped back. We are left with ourselves, our friends, our families, our relationships, our children, our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, and we're left with what is actually real. And in that, guys, we were able to see what happened to George Floyd. Finally, we were able to see it, because it's no different to what happened a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I don't know the names, sadly, but there are hundreds of George Floyds over the last year, hundreds. And we ignored them because we were too busy caring about our access to Netflix and our Wi-Fi speed and our second cars and our second houses. We were too busy caring about all that to actually see what was really real.
Yeah.
So I'm actually now at the point, and this is a big jump, where I'm grateful for COVID. If we've asked in each of our interviews of each of our Friday guests, what is it you hope humanity takes out of this situation? And if it takes out of this situation that this is unacceptable, as much as I would undo the human tragedy for people that were affected by it, then it was worth it. The NFL reversed their decision on kneeling of Colin Kaepernick. I never thought I would see that. The NFL yesterday have put $250 million towards racial equality. I never thought I would see that. And the NFL is potentially the second most influential entity in the United States of America behind the actual government. Mm. And that's going to have ripples that I hope take us to a much better world. That's where I'm at with it.
Well, my friend, we have much to talk about, and I appreciate this dialogue ongoing, but I think we have drawn our time to a close. But I concur, and I would love to talk further because I have, loads to share that I would love your impressions on, and I thank the listeners for tuning in.
And thank you, Sean, and thank you to listeners. And for anyone, as I said at the beginning, for anything that we said or misspoke or put misfeet, that's not the right word, put our feet in the wrong place, please see this was coming from a place of love, and from a place of, let's end with the right phrase, Sean. We're sorry.
We are sorry. And we are all blind and just learning to see. So thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Sean. Have a good day.